that you're gonna look great. But if you wanna stay in shape, well, you better hit the Gymwits.
That's right, man. Tell 'em. Welcome to the Gymwits podcast. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, a.k.a. Chef Sonic.
And I'm Tony Marinucci, a.k.a. Tips with Tony, your registered dietitian.
And we are the Gymwits. All right, so I'm going to take you back to when Justin and I were just maybe around 14-ish, 13, 14-ish, playing Ken Griffey Jr. Major League Baseball for the Super Nintendo. And we were in the middle of an epic series. Justin was up 4-0 on a 7-game series. I'm sorry, 4-0. Justin was up 3-0 in a 7-game series. And I stormed back and force a game 7. So it's game 7, back and forth. We get to the 9th inning, and I'm up by a run. We're going into the bottom of the 9th. Justin's last chance to win, and he unplugs the Super Nintendo, and we never know who would win this epic series that took hours to play. And why am I telling that story? I don't know. It just popped in my head after our conversation about kind of competitiveness and cheating, and that thing popped into my head that we had this amazing 7-game series that Justin didn't let us see through. Do you remember that?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember it like it was 3 days ago.
Not yesterday, 3 days ago.
Yeah, it was a fun series. But as I recall, I think Ryan had initially used that tactic at another game when I was beating him.
You know what it was? You remember the game? It was a baseball game, but they were like robots. Yes. I think it was that game that I used that tactic on you. Maybe not. I'm not sure.
Well, anyway, I learned it from Ryan, and I didn't want to lose, especially after going up 3-0.
But see, the messed up part was that when I used it, it was like benign, like it was one game, and I was probably mad at you for something. I think, in fact, maybe it was like Twisted Metal or something. It was some game where we were playing, and I just, out of annoyance, did it. But it was relatively benign. But like, you took that from me. I came back.
Hey, eye for an eye, man.
Fair enough. All right, anyway, all to get to our subject today, we have a great interview for you guys, really dealing with sports, youth sports mostly, but youth sports, athletics, competitiveness, parents dealing with kids that are in sports. It's a really interesting conversation we had with Craig Smith. And without further ado, here's our interview.
Hey, everyone. We are here with Craig Smith. How's it going, Craig?
It's going great, guys. How are y'all?
Very, very well. Craig is the president of the Academy of Sports and Character and the VP of Marketing for Strata Leadership. So, Craig, where are you located?
Our home office is in Oklahoma City.
Nice. And do you live out there as well?
Well, I'm in the process of moving here as we speak. I've been going back and forth for about 6 months from Arkansas to here.
Nice. So you're down in Arkansas. How's the weather down there?
Well, it's already went from winter to summer.
Yep,
we don't get the springtime like you do up north.
Yep.
Oh, spring's my favorite season. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, sadly, there's no
6 hours.
All right. So as we always ask our guests, Craig, tell us about your sports and or fitness background. Did you play sports growing up? Did you get into fitness later? What's your story?
Well, I grew up playing sports, loved all sports. I grew up in the Memphis, Tennessee area where basketball was king, and played until I got to the age where I realized that I was 5'10" and not a great shooter. So I switched over and played baseball and soccer competitively, and soccer all the way through college.
Wow.
But I've always loved all sports, played tennis a lot when I was young, and now it's kind of transitioned to being a coach. I've coached competitive baseball teams the last several years, taking 3 different age groups in the last 3 years to the Dixie Youth World Series and as a baseball coach. And then the rest of my time is just spent with golf and playing with the kids.
Nice. Now, we'll certainly get into the fitness of youth sports and the way that kids are training now. I'm just curious, when you were coming up, what was the fitness protocol or regimen for athletes that were training on the college level. Do you know if it's different? Are they training differently today from as they did when you were coming up?
It's radically different.
Yep.
It's we thought that if we had a salad each day, we were doing a good job.
Yeah.
Besides our pizza and hot dogs. But especially in the field of nutrition, that is so night and day from today than what it was back then. Also, just weight training and conditioning, we would run and we would lift weights, but the programs and the thought and the science behind it was just being developed then.
Nice.
So can you tell us a little bit about kind of your own background in youth sports, like how you got into it and kind of where you developed your kind of passion for that?
Well, I have 4 boys, and my oldest son, when he was 6, I looked forward to him playing ball and doing different things because sports have been a big part of my life. And when he was 6 years old, we put him on a little youth baseball team, thinking this will be fun. And we moved to a new town, so this would be a good way to meet people. And very quickly we realized that it wasn't quite the small town happiness we thought it was going to be when the coach was throwing things and cursing at the kids. So about 3 weeks into the season, a couple other parents and I went to the coach and tried to politely ask him to say, hey, this just isn't working. I don't think that this is what the kids need to be learning. They're only 6 years old. And he, instead of changing his act, he quit. And so my coaching career began.
Wow. Interesting. So you sort of saw the hole and you jumped into it and you figured you needed to sort of fill that gap. And is that when you started the Academy of Sports and Character? Or was that a later development?
No, that was a much later development.
Okay.
I didn't start the Academy of Sports and Character. I am just the new president of it. But it was born out of the same type of thought that the biggest thing that most parents need to learn, the best word that they need to learn in youth sports is perspective. Every parent thinks that their kid's going pro, even if they have never been in shape or not an athlete and have not been around that type of thing. It doesn't matter if they're from a small town in Arkansas or live in a big city or live in, someplace like Chicago. Every parent has these dreams for their kids, and it's so funny how they put these unrealistic expectations on a child from 6 to 12 years old, expecting them not only to be perfect at a sport they're not playing 24/7 as a job as they do in the pros, but it's just this idea that this misguided idea that my kid's going to be great and everybody else should take notice of it.
Mm-hmm. How do you identify the person that's kind of the standout kid, or can you tell at that young of an age if they're going to develop into a pro?
I'll say it this way. I've been around several elite athletes. I played against Anthony Hardaway, who now is the coach of the Memphis Tigers. When he was in the 8th grade, he was already 6'3" and could jump over anyone. And you could tell that this kid is special. Kids who are in even elementary school, I've seen so many times the one that's the fastest, even the tallest or the strongest, they may be the best at 10, but 9 times out of 10, they're not the best at 18 for a number of reasons. So when people say, oh, my kid is so great, I always take a deep breath and I look around and realize you have no idea what they're going to be yet. Mm-hmm. Now, once they start developing and maturing, going through puberty, you can tell who's got great genetics, who's got amazing abilities that jump higher and run faster, especially athletically. But in some sports, you don't know. In baseball, where there's a lot of work involved, tennis, where kids have been started when they were 3 or 4 years old, and have done nothing but that. They may not be the greatest athlete, but they may be the best tennis player. So I always tell people, make sure you're saving for their college.
Yeah, I guess what I think about Michael Jordan, like as you were talking, I'm thinking about it, like how Michael Jordan didn't make, I think it was his middle school basketball team, and then what he developed into. So it's true. I guess you don't know. I guess that's where your coaching really plays a key role.
Scottie Pippen didn't even get to play his freshman year in college, and then grew 6 inches after he was in college.
Wow.
And went to a small Division II school in Arkansas, and was never the standout until he was a senior in college.
So before you brought up kind of dealing with parents, and I guess overbearing parents, I can imagine are problematic for a coach for a number of reasons. So how do you deal with a parent who thinks their kid is the best on the team, or needs more at-bats or more minutes or more time? How do you manage their own expectations and ideas on where their kid is and where they should be, without kind of insulting them or the kid?
That's a great question. I've learned over the years of coaching. I've been coaching for now 20 years in different sports. But one thing that I've learned is that if a coach sets the expectations early, sets the standards early for this is how we're going to conduct this team, and you treat every kid the same, whether they're the best or the worst, or your son or daughter as the coach, if you treat everyone the same and give them the same amount of instruction, and that doesn't mean they're going to achieve the same, but they get the same time, the same instruction, then a lot of that infighting and parent struggle goes away. However, and that's more for like the league level. As you get to 10, 12, 15 years old, as you move up and you play more elite sports, travel baseball, the AAU basketball, those types of sports, it becomes such a selfish game, because every parent wants their kid to be noticed. Every student then learns, I've got to get my points, my at-bats, my feeling, and my time. And so it becomes harder and harder because of the money and the prestige, whether that's a college scholarship they're looking for or to become pro.
So at what age? So obviously, as the kids age, there's a clear difference between the elite, maybe the middle of the road, and then the ones that just aren't very good. What is the age that you start to, as a coach, kind of start separating them and giving the better players more time, and maybe kind of sitting the lesser players longer? Like, is there an age where you think it's appropriate to really start to make that, kind of delineation between the athletes and kind of levels that they're at?
That's also a good question, and you could interview 3 or 4 more guys and you probably get a different answer than what you'll get here, and you get a different answer from each one. However, I have never been one that believes in giving someone a ribbon or a trophy for showing up or participation. And I believe wholeheartedly in teaching character and teaching to do it right. But one of the attributes of character that every person needs to learn is to understand what competition is, to understand that life is not fair. And in order to play, in order to get that, to bat third, in order to start on the basketball court, to make the team, you may have to put in the effort. You may have to work harder than other people. And for some people, it's easier than others. And those are life lessons that have to be learned. So even at young ages, I think that you can learn that. There are, however, leagues that are more recreational leagues, where they share the time and no one gets preferential treatment. And I think those are fine for development and for especially for kids who are just looking to have fun and play. And I think those are great things. However, if your parent signs you up for a a competitive league, an advanced league, then there's no guarantees. And I think if those are outlined up front, then everybody knows what the rules are, and then you have to go by what the coach says as to who plays and who doesn't. I know in New Jersey there was a big controversy just in the last 3 weeks because there was a cheerleading tryout in high school, and a girl didn't make the team, and so her mother went to the school board, and so they decided to let any girl that tries out for the cheerleading squad is going to get to make it. And I just wonder what that's teaching the young ladies or anyone. Well, if I don't get that job one day, if my mom goes and talks to the boss, maybe I'll get the job. Or what is it? Whatever that we're actually teaching, because sports can teach so many wonderful lessons, and that's not one of them.
Yeah, that teaches the lesson that if you know someone in some sort of position of power or authority, right, you can get what you want, right, which is a really poor, bad lesson, basically showing favoritism to people that have more means or more clout than, say, other people. But I guess that's a part of life, too. So it's strangely not a great lesson, but I guess that's a reality as well. So I read an interesting book, and I don't know if you've read it, Craig, recently, and I think you would very much so enjoy it if you haven't. It was the memoir book written by Keith Hernandez, where he talks basically about his development from when he was a very young kid up until he started doing well in the major leagues with the Cardinals, and then eventually being traded to the Mets afterwards. And he talks a lot about his father, who was a professional, not a Major League Baseball player, but did play professional baseball. And his father, from basically the age of 4 years old, was doing things, setting up little contraptions for him to practice his swing, having him throw at different targets to work his arm, and doing these types of things, always building something, creating something, really pushing him. Now, now he never mentioned that his father was the typical parent that would lobby for his son to play more or to argue with the coach. That wasn't his thing. He would just sort of let it. Sometimes he was the coach, I guess, but he would sort of let that happen. But in terms of his his relationship with his son, he was always pushing him and forcing him to do stuff. And I guess Keith loved it, so it worked out. But do you encourage parents to be that forceful with their kids, or is it maybe everyone's a little bit different? If the kid can handle it, then it's all right. Do some young athletes have an adverse reaction and want to quit the sport because too many people or their parents or their coaches are putting so much pressure on them?
The answer is yes to all of those things, because I've seen them all. I have four boys, and one of the greatest things that happened to me as a coach, my oldest son was never going to be an all-star, but he loved to play.
Yeah,
and so when we played, it had to be for fun. It couldn't be, it wasn't a competition. If we were just throwing in the yard, it's just, let's make it a game. If I tried to coach him too much, he would resist, but he liked to play. My third son, I can set up the tee. I can take him to the field. I can push him. I can coach him. I can talk to him about what he's doing right and wrong, and he feeds off of it. Every kid is different. I remember watching these great parents, these people that I would have thought, and I still think are wonderful people, and they had a son, and they were both very athletic, and their oldest son wasn't. And at like 7 or 8 years old, he was scared of the baseball. And I remember going past the batting cage at the fields one time, and this poor kid is cowering in the corner of the batting cage crying while his parents are screaming at him to just get in there. It's not going to hurt very bad, and so I've seen parents from one end of the spectrum to the other, and have found that it doesn't matter how great your child is, or even their attitude or their personality, if the parent has the proper perspective and pushes them the proper amount that the kid will allow. If the parent allows them to be coached by a good coach, even that teaches the child something. They want to know where the boundaries are, where the rules are. Every kid wants a parent to be their parent. Like I said, some let you coach them more and harder than others. I saw a documentary about Keith Hernandez. I've not read the book, but he grew up in a very poor area of Miami at the time. That he was talking about what that looked like, and playing with the bigger kids in the neighborhood, and how that impacted him. Sometimes the student, the player, whether boy, girl, whatever, they'll let you know how far that they'll let you push them, and if a parent is attuned to that, actually listening and trying to pay attention, not just out for their own ego, they'll know.
I guess what are the qualities that make a good parent of an athlete? So I'm sure we have plenty of listeners that are parents and that kids are either in youth sports or getting into youth sports. So what advice, what would you say makes a good parent? And I'm going to give you kind of two directions. One is a good parent in relation to the coach of the team and how you should interact with the coach and with the team. And then also just a good parent of the athlete. Like, what are the qualities that you really would want to say, these are things you should strive for as a parent of an athlete, regardless of their, ability and skill level?
Well, I think just parenting in general is hard, and I'm not here to tell anybody how to be a parent. Like I said, I've got 4 boys, and I feel like they're good kids, but I learn stuff all the time, things that I do wrong. I think one of the biggest things that every parent, whether their kid's an all-star or not, could learn is humility. It's so funny how it seems like a lot of people, their image of themselves, or how even they think other people think of them, is tied to their students' performance, to their son or daughter's performance on the ball field. If they scored a bunch of points, then they can feel good about themselves as a parent, and if they sat the bench, then for somehow they're less than, and that's just not true. Humility is a huge one. I think another is respect. Respecting the coach, respecting the umpire, respecting the other team, respecting the game. Teaching that way to play is important. How you play the game, no matter what it is, that teaches a lot. I think those two are huge. I think the third one thing that I would say would be just an attitude of gratefulness. I think that it goes through all of life, but if you're grateful for what you've been given, for the opportunity to even play, if you're grateful to be on the team, for your kid to have that opportunity, then you don't seem to get as upset when things don't go your way.
I guess, and speaking of that, relating to that, losing. Now, no one likes to lose, but it's a part of life. And I know that sometimes they try to mitigate losing in whichever way. Ryan might disagree. We'll get into the whole coddling concept a little later. But is there an appropriate age for a kid to start experiencing losing? Right? Should there be ties, or not really recognizing a winner at some age, and then at some point say, okay, now let's really state who our winners are? Or just the second you start playing, someone wins and someone loses?
Well, in all aspects of life, there's a winner and there's a loser. 2 people will go for a job, and one's going to get it, one won't. In sports, the nature of the game is to play to win. It doesn't matter if it's checkers or football. And I think that attitude of giving your best and then measuring yourself against other people is a great quality that some people don't like, so they refuse to play. But that's up to them. But if you decide to play in sports, like I said, I have 4 boys. My youngest is 10, and he's a decent athlete. But my son right above him is 13. He's 3.5 years older, and he's a really good athlete. And so my 10-year-old, since he could play anything and walk, has competed with his older brother. And his older brother won't let him win at anything. wouldn't let him win. So whenever he beats him at horse or a game of one-on-one in the backyard, or even if it's checkers or some video game, that 10-year-old feels a sense of satisfaction and achievement that he's done something. It's not hollow. It's not empty. I've never let my boys beat me at anything, and we play like chess and other games like that. I don't let them win. When my 19-year-old is really smart, he was beating me at chess at age 10, but I didn't let him win. But he feels like he could do that, and I think that's something that is missing in our participatory award culture. That where is the value of giving your all for something and achieving it, and then seeing, wow, look what I did, or I didn't quite achieve it. What do I need to do to work harder, to do better, to do more, so that I can earn this award, so that I can win the game, so that I can get the scholarship?
Yeah, I also see there's theories about how if there's with two siblings, the younger sibling usually is the one that becomes the athlete or becomes the famous dancer or whatever, because they have someone their elder brother, sister, sibling was in that sport, and they then had someone to look up to strive for, to practice. Kind of the first child kind of makes the mistakes, the behaviors, and you learn from that. Do you find that too? Do you see that?
Well, sometimes. I guess it just depends. I've seen some firstborn kids that had that type A, so driven, that they wouldn't let anything stop them. I've seen some younger siblings that were babied enough that they thought it comes easy to me, and by the time it got hard, they did. So sometimes I've seen that. I mean, I've seen that happen, and sometimes I don't. I think there is something to being having a big family and realizing you got to fight for everything you get. But I know some that are only children or people that also achieve. So I don't know how I would think about all that.
So I think despite the maybe culture around kind of bringing kids up to not experience loss, which I think Justin and I argue all the time, because I think it might be a little overblown, like the prevalence of it. Like, I don't think it's a good thing, but I don't think it's as prevalent. But regardless of that, I think as you get to the higher levels, you definitely see that there's a kind of win at all costs mentality amongst athletes, and especially with the endorsements and the money and the fame and all that kind of comes with it. Clearly to get an edge, people will do anything as much, and cheat if possible. So how do you address that with athletes that you have growing up? How do you identify it? How do you address cheating? How do you get them to kind of stay on the straight and narrow when, like, hey, if all I got to do is, X, Y, and Z, and that's going to give me that small competitive advantage, which, that might lead to a scholarship or it might lead to, a pro contract. So how do you address that and kind of keep them morally kind of on the right track, as athletes and as competitors?
Well, I think there's there's a whole lot you just said right there. And in the book I'm writing, I talk about learning to lose and the values that come with learning to lose and what that really means. But this goes directly to what I'm doing now at the Academy of Sports and Character, is the sports can teach character, not just reveal it, but it can teach it. And the character qualities of integrity and responsibility and self-control, just the different qualities that you can learn when you play the game the right way, when you do the things the right way, when you can go to bed at night knowing you did it right. Now, when you do get up to higher levels where they think, oh, I could get the big contract if if I cheat in some way, whether that, the steroids or the manipulating the rules, things like that. I mean, that has to be, when you say somebody's morals, the problem is not everybody has the same morals anymore. Not everybody plays by the same rules morally. However, when it comes to character and respect for the game itself and for others and for yourself. That's the kind of integrity that we teach kids, is that you're cheating yourself. You're not cheating everybody else. You're cheating yourself. And that's when a 10-year-old does beat his 13-year-old brother, he had to earn it. When a kid earns that scholarship and he didn't cheat and he knew that it had to be hard and he put the work in, he earned it. And that's something you have to teach. And I believe you can teach and you should teach students through sports.
So I agree with you 100% on that. But the reality is, I think integrity is such like a vague kind of philosophical idea where like a win or a loss or, $100 million contract or, a scholarship, those are real, almost tangible things and outcomes that are,
Sure.
that are things that people work really, really hard for, and they're willing to skirt the rules. And I think there are plenty of there are interesting studies about like kind of athletes and competitiveness, and the idea that they don't feel, most athletes don't feel guilt for cheating. It's only if they get caught. So how are you able to separate? Like, how are you able to convince somebody that integrity really is valuable in and of itself? Because at the end of the day, I think for many people, they'd rather win and cheat a little bit than lose with integrity, or and so yeah. What's the for you? How do you teach integrity as a real tangible thing, or something that people can strive for and feel good about, versus the just doing that little bit of extra that may not be quite moral to get ahead?
Well, I think that's it's not just in the sports world. That's in the business world. I mean, that's in every world there is. Sure. Cheating. And your marriages. I mean, good grief, we could go through every type of relationship or the thing there is. But specifically with sports, I can't make someone believe that having integrity and doing things the right way is the best way or the only way. I think they experience that. That's why when I talk about learning how to lose. When I talked about this on a Sharky's Artman show a couple weeks ago, she was kind of laughing about learning to lose. It doesn't sound like something I want to learn, and nobody wants to learn it. But the ability to lose, to take a loss, to lose a scholarship, to lose a game, to lose a championship, and learn from that. Let it hurt you, let it eat at you, but learn from it. What can we gain? Because in every one of our lives, failure teaches so much more than success. It's those times in each one of our lives that we've seen where failure is that. I mean, even Yoda says the best teacher failure is. But that's what really teaches us when we can accept losing. That doesn't mean we like it. But we can accept that, because losing is part of a game, just like winning is. Losing is something that we have to deal with, and if you don't like to lose or you can't lose, then you shouldn't play. But go ahead.
So it actually reminds me of a very famous athlete who had an amazing success, and then after her first loss, because was never able to recover. Most likely based on the fact that she couldn't lose. I'm talking about Ronda Rousey, who was the great UFC, the women's champion for so long and so dominant, and then she lost, like everyone loses, and she could just never recover from that. While you see other athletes, often her one of her biggest rivals, Misha Tate, lost quite a bit, but she was able to deal with it. She had that integrity, and she kept up, and she kept with it, and then eventually she became champion as well. So it just made me think of that.
I tell you
right away when you say that.
Well, the word that comes to my mind is also the title of the book I'm writing. It's called Next, and the word next. I used to make my baseball players say it to me. Baseball is such a game of failure. You'll make errors. You'll strike out. Mistakes all the time. The best hitters hit 3 out of 10. And so when a kid would strikeout and they're mad at themselves. Their mother in the stands is yelling at them, and they'll have tears in their eyes, or they'll be just anger. And I'll make them look at me and say the word next. Say it, say the word next. Get that out of the way. Learn from it. What'd you do wrong? What can you fix? And now leave it alone, put it in the past, and move on to the next phase of your life, the next play, the next at bat, the next up and down the court in basketball, whatever it is. If you don't learn to lose, to deal with your failure, learn from it and then move on, you're condemned to live in that feeling of either anger, pain, sadness, and that's going to then impact your next decision. It's going to impact your next at bat. It's going to impact your next side out, whatever sport it is, whatever game it is. If you don't learn to live in the present, leave the past behind you, to learn from it, move on from it, and live in that next feeling. I think that's how you learn to lose. You learn to deal with failure, and those kids, it doesn't matter if they lose a game, lose a championship, they're back the next season. You think LeBron James cares that he's lost how many championships he's been to in a row now, and yet he keeps coming back? He's that great. If he let that consume him, he wouldn't get back. He learns from it, does the best he can, and then tries to go again.
So, pivoting a little bit, so you mentioned a couple times the Academy of Sports and Character. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Academy and the mission and kind of your role within it? Well, the Academy exists to help coaches. We want to be a resource for coaches of all ages, from elementary school. We even work with Strata and some of our executive leadership. We deal with coaches that are in NBA and beyond. Coaches who want to do things not just, let's say, the right way, but to do things at a little higher level. They see their position more than just wins and losses, but as changing lives, as molding lives, as being that, whether it's a father figure to those kids who are small, who need a great example and they don't need somebody else yelling at them, or whether it's the guys who volunteer to coach in the police athletic league who've never coached before and want to do it the right way, or the guys who are in high school who are getting paid to coach and they're dealing with problem kids and issues all the time, and we try to give them resources, programs that help them reward the positive things that happen and how to deal with the negative, how to teach these character qualities as they go through their season, and how to deal with winning and losing. We try to be a resource for that.
That's great. Now, there's a couple things I'm curious about, and we almost started off with this discussion a little bit about training. Could you tell us a little bit about the training of young athletes? Clearly, they do a lot in their sport, but are young athletes starting to cross-train a lot more? I read an interesting article in the New York Times about very young powerlifters and how young kids are getting into powerlifting, or very Olympic lifts, or very sort of athletic explosive lifts, things like that. Are young athletes really starting to do that to enhance their sports? Is that a good thing? Do you feel that it's safe?
Well, first of all, I 100% believe in cross training.
Okay.
I think kids specialize way too soon. I see so many kids that or their parents think, well, you're 10, you've got to decide the sport you're going to play the rest of your life, and they just let them play that one sport. And if you look at the statistics of even college athletes, the best college athletes played several sports in high school, and especially as they were younger. And so I don't believe that they need to specialize so soon. The powerlifting, I have heard about some of that and have read some studies on that, and I think lifting weights is great. I would defer to those doctors that know the age appropriateness of that. I've always kind of erred on the side of I'd rather wait till you're starting to hit puberty and your bones are stronger before you can do all that. I think about 13 years old would probably be a good time, but that's my opinion. based on my own reading and my own my own life. There are people who know a lot better than I do. I just wouldn't put my own kids in powerlifting at a young age, but I think lifting weights is great as they get a little older into their teenage years. I think it's a wonderful way to train.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
I definitely agree.
I'm curious about is there any sort of nutrition protocol for these young athletes? Do you advise it? What do the parents think? Like, how does that look? And do you see a difference in when someone has better nutrition in their performance?
There is no doubt that is one of the greatest things that has happened over the last, I'd say, even 10 years. I remember I grew up the son of a doctor, and even though he was a medical doctor, we had a Coke fountain in our house. I could push a button and have Coke all day long, and we didn't think anything about that. However, as we have as things we've learned about, even I remember people smoked on planes when I was growing up. So we've learned a lot about what's healthy and what's not. And just for a great example, the kids who have the proper nutrition, the proper rest, the parents who believe in that, you do see a great, a real impact on their recovery time, on their ability to play well. I know there's a lot of players and students who don't have access to great nutrition, and they may be great athletes, but they struggle. And I've seen that over and over, and a lot of that is not their fault. But and I think that goes back to the parents and even the economy sometimes. But I've seen a huge impact on what on nutrition has to do, not only with older athletes, but with kids in sports. So
I'm wondering something. Over the last 20 years or so, or maybe even longer, has there been a difference? Has it changed with the level of participation for young female athletes? And are they training now differently than they used to? How has that aspect of youth sports come along?
But just like in every facet of our culture, there are many more opportunities for girls to play all kinds of sports. When I was even growing up, you're talking 40 years ago, girls had like 2 sports, and that was their choices. And now there are so many more opportunities and so many more ways to train. And once again, the last 20 years, last 10 years, last 5 years, those things exploding. Somebody you'd probably love to talk to is Dr. Jen Welter, who is the first NFL coach as a woman. And she's just has an amazing platform, what she's doing for female athletics and just for people. She's an amazing person. I just think the more opportunities we give and we allow everyone to play whatever sport they want, and then give them the same opportunity from, it doesn't matter, race or economic or gender. It's that shouldn't preclude someone from playing a sport, being active, doing the things that they want to do.
So you mentioned you're working on a book. When is that going to be available? Are you still kind of in the process of writing it, or is it being edited at this point? Like, do you have kind of an idea of when that book will be out?
I'm hoping that it will be completely finished in the fall. My target is December, but as far as release, it's still got a couple more things to go through, but it's almost there.
Nice. Well, Craig, thank you so much for coming on the Gymwits, and of course, thank you for what you're doing. I think it's immensely important, especially in our world today, where so many kids are glued to their tablets or some sort of video game or whatever it is. The opportunity to play as a team, interact with other people, learn to work together are vital skills that might be missing or that our youth may not get the same way as generations past. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
You are so welcome. I appreciate you guys and wish you all the best. To have your listeners check out sportsandcharacter.com if they want any more information. and appreciate it.
So so sportsandcharacter.com. Is there anywhere else we can find you? Is there any social media?
We also have a Facebook,
Okay.
the Academy of Sports and Character, and that's where we are.
Awesome. Well, Craig, once again, thank you for coming on the Gymwits. And yeah, let's talk again. We'd love to hear some stories and about future, about some other developing athletes. And yeah, it's very cool.
I'd love to anytime, and I've got lots of stories from ways kids have changed their lives and other people's and other things like that, and we can do that in the future. So I appreciate
we'll
it greatly,
have to do
guys.
a part 2 at some time. Yeah. All right, Craig. Well, thank you so much, and have a great day.
You too.
So bringing it back a little bit, Ryan, as long as I can remember, hated losing, never liked losing, right? So much to the point where even in our little fake wrestling league, when we were in junior high school, he would cheat. Not even when he was involved in the match, because he would consider it a loss if whoever his wingman would lose. He considered it a loss, so he refused to let anyone win. So that's how much Ryan hates losing. Although I think it's changed a little bit.
Well, clearly I have to, but I do remember our fake wrestling league, and I remember being undefeated in our fake wrestling league for a short period of time until the fateful day where what's his name, James. Remember, I was attacked, kind of fake attacked by like James and a few people, and it was funny because we weren't talking. I forget why, but you were like, I was mad at you or you were mad at me. But then this guy James challenged me, and then Justin was like, I bet on Ryan, and then all of a sudden we were best friends again because like Justin had my back against James, but James beat me.
Yeah.
I think that happened many times.
Yeah.
That happened many times. So, I thought that was definitely an interesting interview. I work with children a lot, and I think I understand the sort of where Ryan and I are butting heads. And, of course, I think Craig and I would side a little bit more. Ryan thinks that the whole coddling of athletes is not as widespread as perhaps we make it out to be. But let me put a different slant on it. That, yes, I'm going to agree with Ryan that in the competition world of competitive sports, youth sports, yes, it's about who wins, and as we see, people will cheat. So it's even taken too far. I think what Craig and I are referencing is not just in youth sports, but in general. There's a sort of a sense of entitlement that children have, that parents have, and not just in sports, but I've seen it very much working with kids and parents. A lot of teachers in schools I've had this conversation with, that people just don't want to lose in terms of whatever it is, whether it's a kid getting a part in the school play, a solo in the orchestra, anything along those lines, or not making the cheerleading team, stuff like that. And instead of saying too bad, that's just how it goes, school boards, whatever it is, are saying, okay, we'll make accommodations, we'll sort of let it in order to not have to say, no, we're not going to do this, it's too bad, that's how it goes. We're seeing a lot of concessions being made in order not to hurt, not to, even put in quote, hurt kids' feelings. I actually dealt with this recently where I was, there was a student that actually was super talented, but conduct was very poor. And the discussion was to remove him from the situation. And his parents were, they're actually pretty cool, but they kept on mentioning, we don't want to hurt his feelings. We don't want to hurt his feelings. It's like, this kid is, I don't like to put this on a kid, but he was a terror to work with for the other kids. He was incredibly disruptive. He made things very difficult on me as a teacher with other teachers. And their concern is, I don't want to hurt his feelings, when instead of that, it could have been, could be a lesson for him, that if you're going to act a certain way, these are the repercussions. So I think that that's a lot more of what we're referring to not just in youth sports.
So I want to hear I'd like to hear what you think also about this, because I think it's so far been a 3-pronged kind of discussion on this aspect. So I'd like to hear what you think, Tony. My only response to that is that's where it's tough to use personal anecdotes, because we live in, you live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. I
was
work
thinking location is everything.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, we can all come up with anecdotes about parents and situations in which people expect something, and that happens all the time in all walks of life, and it's nothing new. It's not new that people just kind of have a sense of it. Certain people have a sense of entitlement. So I think sometimes using the personal anecdotes can be a little tricky, because I've absolutely seen that. But I've also seen the other side where parents are like, well, it's too bad, tough luck. And I have definitely seen a correlation between, in my own experience, affluence and that sense of entitlement. But that's something you would expect. And so it's something that I want to be careful about, kind of letting that color my thoughts. So my thing is, how widespread are these ideas? And are we, yes, we're going to have a situation where, like the court case that you were discussing, but how widespread is that? Is this really an epidemic? It's kind of like the whole the whole debate now with when it comes to PC being PC on college campuses and all that. It's like, how much of it is really that there's this liberal terror on college campuses and people can't say anything, and how much of it is like there are some outliers, and if you project those and blow that up, it makes for a great story. And so I think in a lot of these cases, it's you'll take one or two anecdotes and blow it up to be something big, and it sounds really bad. And if we're a huge country with 300 million people, so we can find dozens of hundreds of these examples, but does it really is it really an expression of the way that things are? So I think that's my thing, because I agree that kids can learn from losing. So it's just a question of we hear this a lot now, these kids, they're so entitled and blah blah blah. So I want to know, I just want to know, what are the real numbers? And I'd love to know what you think and what you've experienced.
I grew up in a very how do I put this? Most people were in the upper class of where I grew up in Long Island, and that's all I saw was coddling. That's it. That's all I saw. Do I think you're teaching your kid anything? No, but I can't really speak to other areas, and I think you're right. I don't know if it's like that in other states or other areas. Well,
and we obviously have these skewed New York eyes.
Yeah, exactly. That too. New York is in itself is different than most of the world.
Absolutely. And my personal opinion is that it's not just kids, that it's adults too. That this sense of entitlement that, I should go first. Like Ryan, you mentioned the story, which I will never forget, about the guy walking into Chipotle, basically wanting to return a burrito that wasn't made exactly to his specs. And it wasn't even made at that Chipotle. And he's holding up the line, arguing, yelling at the food service people, which is one of my pet peeves. It's just incredibly entitled, feeling that he should get whatever he wants. And you just see this all the time. Granted, we're in New York. Maybe it happens more in big cities. But I know that's sort of my view, is that just people are getting more and more entitled. But who knows? That just might be my vision on it. Yeah,
again, it's tough to say. I think, again, we always are going to encounter entitled people. So, and again, the more affluent you are, the more entitled you're going to be. I'm entitled. Like when I'm going to interrupt you. I don't know if that's true. I know that's your sort of view, and it would seem to be correct. But I think that people in general are entitled. That you would think that people that are not as high on the economic spectrum would be less entitled, and perhaps it's true, but maybe it's not. I've seen I'll use this as an example. Once again, it's anecdote, so I'm not any proof. You see people that are almost begging on the streets, entitled. Right? They, if you give them money, they'll ask for more. They won't. They don't want food.
They don't want food.
They'll keep asking.
They'll want
ask
your
for
money.
More, right? They want more, right. So you even see this, right? That's a sense of entitlement.
Yeah. Sure.
That they don't. That right. They should be given something. So I think it happens. It's widespread.
I think there's I think we're looking at different aspects of the word entitled.
I agree. Yeah.
Now the person that if somebody's truly kind of in a position of need, they're not going to turn down the food or the money. Yes, we all have. If you're in New York, you all have that experience of giving, or somebody giving money to a homeless person, or giving food to a homeless person that says they're hungry, and it's like, no, I don't want this, just give me money. Well, that's a different issue. There's something beyond just them being homeless and needing money or needing something, and there's something else there. But obviously, they're not entitled in the way that you or I or somebody we know might be entitled. And I think, again, I just question whether or not it's more widespread than it has ever been. And maybe it is. Maybe social media plays a role in it too. I don't know, but I just don't think it's this epidemic that is played out to be. To me, it's no more or less of a problem than it's ever been.
If you think about just the way parenting has become a lot more hands-off,
yes.
And the kids get to talk back now. There's a lot of I just feel like then it's going to translate into the sports.
Well, I do think I think that as things are more, it's interesting because our parents in general, I don't know, and that's something we need to know. Our parents in general more hands-on as far as I want to see everything you're doing. Do parents tend to blame teachers more? Possibly. I can definitely see a world where, especially in situations where you have more, I can see a world where that's the case, that maybe parents are a little bit, they coddle their kids, and maybe that does happen now. I guess we strayed a bit from our initial thing. To me, it was more coddling and the value, how much or how widespread is the kind of anti-competitiveness? Because I think then there's a whole different story about, do we coddle kids too much? And I think that there is, certainly can be a case made for that. Because but again, I don't know how overblown it is, or how, are millennials that bad? I've read, again, I'm sorry, I'm ranting now. But you hear all this stuff about how horrible millennials are, but then it's I don't know, the millennials have been kind of served a crappy, deck of cards or hand of cards, from their predecessors. So, you question, is it?
I'm a millennial.
Yeah, exactly. So no, that's the thing. So it's we're just past it, I guess.
Ryan and I are called Zennials.
Yeah, I don't know. We're not quite millennials, but we're not
AKA
Gen X.
guys are old.
We're right on the cusp between Gen X, because we're not Gen X, and we're not really millennials. Although we could more fit into that than we fit into Gen X. But Ryan and I are exactly the year. It's 2 or 3 years called Zennials. I'm happy to be a Zennial.
All right. Well, I guess that's it. So some housekeeping, because we didn't get to it in the beginning. We're an Alexa, not an Alexa app. We are an Alexa skill. So if you have an Amazon Echo, you can ask Alexa to enable the Gymwits, and you can listen to us on your Amazon Echo. If you haven't done it yet, go and fill out the survey.libsyn.com, and help us make some money off this podcast. It helps us, again, the numbers and demographic stuff will help us with potentially getting some sponsorships, and help us provide some more content and get some cool guests and all that good stuff. And otherwise, all of our other stuff is at thegymwits.com, our social media. Leave a review if you haven't on iTunes. All that stuff really helps. The engagement really helps. We're getting great engagement, and the more the better. And again, the more we can get from you, which is very small, the more we can put some stuff out there and get some cool people and get some good projects going. So that's it. As usual, I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, aka Chef Sonic, reminding you that truth does not sell.
And I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.
And we are the Gymwits.